Sorry for the delay. Yeah, very good evening. No, very good evening. Yeah, okay, great. Sorry, I guess I didn't upload the record. I'll do it today after the session, okay? Even the code, I will add it to the code folder, tool drive folder, both record and the folder, both record and code. So, um, we were talking about AOP. We saw altogether a new way of programming, right? So, we are able to address this cross-cutting concern issues. Yeah, without writing much code, we are able to address the cross-cutting concern issues. I mean, separate that cross-cutting concerns from the applications, business logic, presentation logic, data access code, whatever it is. Yes, we are able to separate it, right? Yeah. So, so we got some terminology here. Let me talk about the terminology, AOP terminology, which you'll be hearing it. Uh, and then we'll see string and ORM integration, means ORM frameworks integration, like Hibernate, string Hibernate integration. And then we'll see how AOP helps us in transaction management. Okay, by generally, so we have to deal with transactions when dealing with business logic, right? So, I'm sorry, how to deal with those transactions and all. Now, AOP helps us in this regard. You got declarative transaction management support here. Declarative transaction management support means, you see, without having to write the transaction management code, we can ask the framework to handle the transactions for us. Using this annotations, we can do that. So we don't have to explicitly write the transaction management code in it. Okay. So first, let's learn this AOP terminology. Already you know this AOP concepts, but what I'll do is generally I have a habit of just explaining this after you're familiar with this coding and all. Yeah. So first of all, um, I'll make you people understand how this AOP works internally. Okay. So there are few things which you need to understand. You see, we were able to apply this advice code to this methods, right? Target methods. Okay. You know how the framework will know that this target methods have been invoked and how it it applies that advice code to this target methods. How it applies that advice code to the target method here. Yes. You know, actually, internally, the framework uses something called as proxies for this. Framework uses something called as proxies. So if you're curious to know how it works internally, yes, what happens is here, the framework actually uses proxies. Proxy. So what is a proxy? So anyone got any idea about a proxy? Heard about proxy objects? Proxy object here in Java. So proxy object, okay, I'll tell you. So proxy object, I can say that it acts on behalf of another object. You'll find that proxy object actually, it acts on behalf of another object. That is a proxy object. So here, this proxy object, it will look similar to your original object, and it intercepts the methods of that original object here. Yes, proxy object is a sorry, proxy object acts on behalf of another object. It acts on behalf of another object. The proxy object contains, or proxy object intercepts, sorry, intercepts the method calls of target object. It intercepts the method calls of the target object here, I can say. So, for example, here, let's say, you see, you have configured that advice for this order controller beings, right? You applied the advice to the order controller beings. You'll find that internally the framework creates a proxy object for this. Okay, internally the framework creates a proxy object for this target object. And you know what? Here, it will ensure that all the method calls for this target object will go through the proxy. Okay, all the method calls for the target object will go through that proxy. So in our example, we have this order controller. order controller is a target object whose methods have been advised, right? Now the framework creates a proxy. You know what? You'll find that surprisingly, the proxy object also will have the methods which are defined in the order controller. Yes. So framework internally creates a proxy object. And this object also contains the methods which you got in the order controller, but they'll be dumb methods. Okay, they'll be used to receive the method calls. That's it. Whatever the methods you have defined in the order controller, you'll find those methods in the proxy object also. And proxy object will be intercepting the method calls, the client's calls. So it will take those calls on behalf of the target object here. It is order controller. And what the proxy does after intercepting that method calls, you know what? Here, it will check whether any advice has to be applied to that controller methods. It will check whether there is any advice to be needs to be applied to that method, target method. If so, it will call that advice methods here. You have aspect, right? You have aspect. So in the aspect you got advice methods. So it will call that advice methods. Advice method contains advice code, that is cross-cutting consent code, right? Yeah. So it will call the advice methods here appropriately. And once that advice code finishes execution, once the advice code finishes execution, the proxy object will call the controller method. Proxy object will call the controller's methods here. So that is how it works. Okay. So internally, a proxy is used. Yes. To take care of this method calls and to apply the advice to the target methods. So that is what I have configured here. You know, I said I'm enabling AOP in the configuration file, right? I said I was enabling AOP in the configuration file. How using an element? I'll show you that element. Can you see this? Aspect J auto proxy. Aspect J auto proxy. So it indicates that we want the framework to dynamically create these proxy objects. We want the framework to dynamically create these proxy objects. Automatically, those proxies have to be created. Yeah. Okay. So proxies are created dynamically at runtime here in this AOP. Please remember this point. It is very important. Okay. Yes. When the proxies are created dynamically at runtime. Yes. Okay. So any questions in this regard, please let me know first of all. Okay, good. Now let's go through this AOP terminology. So having understood this proxies, so you'll hear this various terms generally. A join point. So what is a join point? So a join point is a well-defined point in the execution of the application where we can apply the advice code. So they are basically well-defined points in the program execution. Well-defined points. You see, like method execution, exception being raised, object instantiating the object. These are all well-defined points in the program execution, I can say. Yes. You'll find that here your Spring framework, it supports this join points like method execution and exception handling. You may have other types of well-defined points also, as I told you people. Instantiation, object instantiation, instantiating the object, or loading the class. You'll have several other well-defined points also in the application, the join points. But Spring supports these two join points where we can use them to apply the advice code, I can say. Yes. Okay. Yes. Next, point cuts. So when I say point cut, you'll find that point cut means, you see, set of join points set of join points selected for applying the advice code. Okay, so the set of join points which are selected to apply, basically I can say that they are point cuts. And how do we configure this point cuts using point cut expression? In the last class we have discussed about point cut expression, right? So that point cut expression is used to select the join points for which you would like to apply the advice. The join points which are selected for applying the advice, the join points which are selected for applying the advice, we call them as point cuts. Okay, yeah. Next, what is an aspect? But before we talk about aspect, so let's go through this target object and proxy object. You see, target object is an object whose methods are being advised. You know that, yes. Here, proxy object, just now we have discussed about it. You'll find that proxy object which acts as which acts on behalf of target object. It is responsible for intercepting the target method calls and executes the advice method for the told people. Yes. You know, here, now when I talk about an aspect, this is important. So already you saw that what is an aspect, right? So an aspect is the merger of advice, that means the cross-cutting consent code, and the point cuts taken together defines the logic, what, when, and where the advice code needs to be executed. So this is an important point. Okay. Yeah. You see, in the aspect, what you'll have the advice code, that is the cross-cutting concern code, and the point cuts. So this advice code and point cuts taken together, you see, it defines the logic, what, when, and where the advice code needs to be executed here. Where the advice code needs to be executed. Yes. You see, what, when, and where. Let me explain it. This is very important. What, when, and where. Yes. So when I say what, here, what is the advice code we have to execute? That is what of an aspect. When we talk about an aspect, you'll have these three things: what, when, and where in the aspect. What means, what is the advice code you want to execute? That is the first thing. What means what advice code you want to execute. Next, when means when of an aspect. When I say when, what does that mean? Can someone tell me?
When means like after or before.
Yeah, that's right. You won't execute. Yeah. When you won't apply the advice, that means before the method starts execution or after the method finishes execution, whatever it is. Okay. Yes. And then you see here, you'll find that you have where of an aspect. Where of an aspect. So where means you see where this advice code has to be applied. Okay. This point cut expression describes where you want to apply that advice code. Where you should apply that advice code. Before or after or around. Yes. You see, these are the things which you'll find in an aspect. You see, together this advice code, you know, the point cut expression and what else, that advice type when you want to execute the advice before or after, everything together, it generates a logic, okay, which defines where and when what code to execute to the framework. It understands that. Yes. So this is about an aspect. I hope you people got it. So very key to understand this. Next, weaving. Yeah, here is also another important point. Weaving is the process of applying aspects to a target object to create a new proxied object. Yes. Okay. So applying the aspects to the target object, that process is called as weaving, and which in turn creates a proxy object here. Yes. Now, aspects, you'll find that aspects are woven into sometime during the execution of the application. Typically, an AOP container dynamically generates a proxy. You see, as I told you people, proxy object that delegates to a target object while weaving in aspects. This is how Spring AOP aspects are woven. So when the weaving is done at compile time or runtime, that is at runtime, we call it as runtime weaving in Spring AOP. Okay. Okay. So you'll find that earlier when I started with Spring Framework, this aspects and all, we have to take care of it, creating the proxy object, and we have to explicitly deal with this proxies and all. But now you will find that you don't have to worry about it. You know what? Yeah, the framework will take care of it, dynamically generating the proxies. And you see, accordingly delegating this proxies to the target objects so that the proxy objects will call the target objects. Yes. So all those things will be taken care here. Yeah. So these are the terms which you need to know when it comes to this AOP. I hope you understood this terminology and just remember this terminology. You see, when you read it somewhere, AOP, or talking to someone about this AOP, so this terms will help you people a lot. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yeah. If it is clear, then I'll move on. Okay. And last thing about this AOP, which I want you people to understand. Okay, a thought on AOP. So this is something which I would like to definitely discuss. You know what? So far, you'll find that we have gone through various stages. Different ways to avoid redundancy, right? Yes. Yeah. You see, first, initially when we started, to avoid redundancy, we have used inheritance, right? I can say we have used inheritance, and the other one is delegation. Okay, inheritance and delegation. Okay, so here when I say inheritance, how to avoid redundancy with the help of inheritance, right? So we can, by extending a class, you'll find that we can inherit the code, redundant code, a common code across various subclasses through the inheritance, right? Through the inheritance, we can just make sure that we inherit the common code across the various subclasses. But inheritance always won't work, right? We can't keep on making classes extend another class a lot, right? Yes. Okay. Yeah, but inheritance won't work always. You know that. Another alternate is delegation. Delegation means, what do people think when I say delegation? What does that mean? Yes, delegation means. Giving the responsibility. You know what? How do we do delegations? You see, through method calls. For example, here we need a specific functionality which is defined in another object or which is provided by another object. How will you use that functionality which is defined in another object or which is provided by another object? Yes. How one object will avail the functionality which is provided by another object? Yes. What you'll do? Yes. You see how one object will use the functionality which is provided by another object. You see, you will find that we'll be using method calls for that purpose, right? One object will call the methods of another object. So that is how an object can use the functionality of another object. In this case, you see this log aspect or aspect, you see, now to print this log details, it is calling that info method of the logger object. So it is delegating it by calling it. Yes. Okay. Yes. So basically we are delegating it. Yes. Okay. So basically we are delegating this. So, but you know what? This method calls also, they have become very much redundant. Even this method calls, you'll find that they're very much redundant, right? We saw that in our controller, this delegation model also where we call the methods. Okay, so one object will delegate the task of executing something to another method or processing something to another method, right? By calling the another object by calling the methods of that object. You see, the controller's method is calling that logger object method. So that is how it is delegating that logging task to the log to that logger object. So, but this approach also has got some drawbacks or limitations. What is it? Too many method calls in our code. Too many method calls in our code. Yeah. So these are the two ways which we used to work with right from the beginning till now, till I've introduced AOP. Yeah. Is it clear for you people, first of all? Inheritance and delegation. Inheritance and delegation. Yeah. Okay. Hope you people got it. Next, you see, aspects offer an alternate to these two approaches, inheritance and delegation. So this is where your aspects come into the picture, right? So with the help of aspects, you see, now this is an alternate to aspects or alternate to inheritance and delegation. So without using this inheritance and delegation, we can still write, we can still reuse the code, existing code. You see, we can avoid redundancy. We can write the code in a more cleaner way, right? Yes. How can we say it is more cleaner? Because we won't have method calls. We don't have to extend other classes and all such things, right? Yeah. So externally, you see, with AOP, you still define the common functionality in one place, that is aspects, but you can declaratively define, declaratively means using annotations or XML configurations. You can define how and where this functionality is applied without having to modify the class to which you are applying the new feature. Yes. Okay. Yes. Here, you know, what are the benefits of this AOP? First of all, you see, the logic of each concern is in one place as opposed to being scattered all over the code base, right? So our code, cross-cutting concern code, is not scattered across the application. Now it is in one place in the aspects, right? You can, in set of aspects, now you can call it as a module also. You see, service modules are cleaner because they only contain code for their primary concerns or functionality. And secondary concerns have been moved to the aspects, yes. You take any service components, now you won't find the cross-cutting concern code in them. And even not even the method calls, right, to those to that cross-cutting concern methods. You won't find anything in the service components. It is completely segregated. You have it in a separate. You have them in a separate classes called as aspects, right? Yes, we have been moving them to the aspects here. That is what we did so far. So this is the advantage of using AOP. So you see, uh, inheritance, delegation, and AOP. Now we have moved on to AOP now. So far we have worked with inheritance, delegation model, that is method calls, right? So the last thing is AOP here. Yes. So this would be great to understand how AOP is better than inheritance and delegation. Yes. Too much of anything is going to be a problem. But in some cases, of course, still we'll be using inheritance. To some extent, we'll be using method calls. Without it, it's not possible. I'm not saying that we have to completely avoid using inheritance and delegation, but still, yes, it will be part and parcel of your code. But additionally, you see, AOP will bring you, will help you to develop better and cleaner code. Yes. Okay. I hope you people got it. So, any questions in this regard?
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you show an example where aspects or AOP is used for transaction management?
Yeah, that is what I said. The next thing, transaction
Okay.
management. So after integrating or Hibernate framework with the Spring, so we'll be going through it. Yes.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
So now with this, I'll close this AOP here for now. Let's talk about integration of Spring and Hibernate. So Spring and Hibernate frameworks. So we can integrate these two frameworks together. You'll find that you have a module for this called as Spring ORM, Object Relational Mapping. Spring ORM, you know the full form already. Spring ORM module is there in Spring framework. Okay, sorry, just a second, please. Yeah, sorry, excuse me. Just a minute, please. Just a minute. Yeah, I'm sorry. So let's talk about this Spring and Hibernate integration. You know what? The Spring and Hibernate integration, it's not going to be a very difficult stuff here. So it would be very easy and straightforward integrating Spring with Hibernate. Okay? Yeah. How would you do that? Let's see. So now you know why we need Hibernate framework here, right? So already so far we have worked with Spring. Now why we need to integrate Hibernate here in Spring with Spring? What do people think? Yes. Yes. So the purpose or the need for integrating Spring and Hibernate. You see, so far we have explored various features of Spring, like Spring container, dependency injection, what else? Aspects, especially now. You saw this aspects, right? It's a great thing to do. It's one of the important feature of Spring framework. Yes. You know, how will you do that? Let's see. So the thing is, we try to integrate Hibernate because Hibernate provides us persistence support, right? If you want to interact with the database server. So what Spring Framework did is here, they didn't again provide a persistence solution on their own, but instead they just wanted us to use the existing persistence frameworks. They don't want to reinvent the wheel again because already there are a lot of frameworks which help us to handle this persistence, right? So now how will you integrate this Hibernate with Spring? That is what we'll see. First of all, you see by integrating Spring and Hibernate, you'll be able to avail the features of both Spring and Hibernate as well. Yes, together. So that is the advantage of integrating the frameworks. That is the advantage of integrating the frameworks, I can say. Yes. You know, here, first of all, for integrating Spring with Hibernate, you need Hibernate libraries. Let's try to add the Hibernate libraries here. So I'll just copy them from my other projects. Let me quickly do that so that we don't have to literally type in all these things. Just so we need some dependencies. So I'll be adding those dependencies here. You see, you got this form.xml file. Uh, just in our project, let's just add this dependencies and let me just explain them. So first of all, we got this dependency Hibernate ORM. Hibernate ORM, yeah, this is the dependency. I've just added Hibernate 4 libraries here, 4.3.11 libraries. That is what we did. Next, we got this MySQL dependency here, if you can check this. Yes, the JDBC drivers, always we need them. And you see, the other important dependency here is you'll find that you need Spring ORM libraries as well. Spring ORM is a module, right? So you need that Spring ORM as well. Yes. So these are the things which you need to work with Spring and Hibernate integration. Spring ORM module helps you people to integrate Spring with Hibernate. Spring ORM module helps you people to integrate Spring with Hibernate, I think so. Yes. You know, here, make sure that you always try to use the appropriate version of Hibernate. Okay, so the thing is, we are working with Spring 4, so even I'm using Hibernate 4 here. Okay, I'm using Hibernate 4. Yes, so it supports Hibernate 4, not a problem. Yes. Now, after adding these dependencies, so let's concentrate on the Hibernate related stuff, what you need here. So generally, when we talk about Hibernate framework, you need Hibernate libraries, right? Sorry, Hibernate configuration file. We have added libraries. The next thing is we need Hibernate configuration. So let me just copy that Hibernate configuration file here. Okay, yes, let's just do that. I have this configuration file, and I don't have to teach you people how to create this configuration file. Already we did this a lot of times. I'll just copy the configuration file here. Let me add it to this resources folder. See, this is where you need to add it. So it is a web application. You'll add it here in the src main resources folder. Okay, so hibernate.cfg.xml file. Okay, now you check this configuration file. So you all are familiar with this Hibernate configuration file. It's nothing new to you people. There's something which is missing here. So what is missing? Yes,
Connection details.
the connection details. Yes, the database connection details, they are missing. So don't worry. Here, the thing is, we'll be configuring those details, database configurations, in the Spring configuration file itself. Okay, so we'll configure those things in the Spring configuration file itself. Yes. Okay, now let me do one thing. I will add an entity class. I got an entity class. So we'll work with that product table. So let me just add this entity class here. I'll create a package entity. Yes. So this is our same regular entity class. Now you don't have to configure anything additionally if you want to use this entity class in Spring Framework. Okay. Yes. So this entity class is mapped to the table. You can check this. This is the same old entity class. Nothing new about it. Yes. Next, here we need to configure the data source details. Where you will configure them, as I told you people, let's configure those data source details here in the Spring Bean configuration file itself. You have the other configuration file, root context XML file. As we have discussed initially, you'll have two application contexts. One is root context, root application context, okay, where where you'll have all non-web components configurations, okay. Yes. So now this configuration also here, it's not web related configuration, right? So you will add it here in this root context XML file itself. Yes. So let's add it to this root context XML file here. Okay, so I have those data source configurations. Now I'll quickly just add them. If you have any non-web related components other than, okay, you will just simply add them to the root context XML file. Now if you can check this here, you see we have a predefined bean class called as driver manager data source. We got a predefined bean class called as driver manager data source. Going forward, I'll show you the other ways of configuring these details and all. Okay, as of now, just let's follow this approach. Yeah. So here you see this driver manager data source is a bean class which is defined in this Spring framework. It helps you people to configure the data source details. This driver manager data source, it holds that configuration details, I can say. It holds the configuration details. Yes, that is what you'll see. You see, these are all the properties of variables which are declared in this bean class, and we are using these properties to store that assign that values database confidence. That's it. Once you are done with this, now this is the important part of this integration. So we'll be using a bean class here for integration. What is that bean class which we'll be using for integration? You know, that is local session factory bean. Yes, local session factory bean here. You find that this local session factory bean, it is from ORM module. Okay, this is actually from ORM module here, and this local session factory bean, you'll find it in various packages in Hibernate 3, Hibernate 4, Hibernate 5. You'll find it in various packages here. Now you see, it depends on the version of Hibernate framework which you're using. If you're using Hibernate 4, then use this local session factory bean. from Hibernate 4. If you're using Hibernate 3, then use local session factory bean from Hibernate 3. If you're using Hibernate 5 version, then you can use that local session factory bean from the Hibernate 5 package. This way it depends. Okay, yeah. So I'm using Hibernate 4 here, the dependency which I got. So I'll just import that local session factory bean from Hibernate 4. That is what I'll do. Next, this bean, local session factory bean, this bean itself is going to help us to integrate Spring with Hibernate, I can say. In order to integrate Spring with Hibernate, this local session factory bean is going to play a key role. Yes. With this bean itself will integrate Spring and Hibernate, I can say. Okay. Okay. You know, we have to configure that Hibernate configuration details here. See config location. Config means configuration file location. So value is class paths colon config. You have a config folder. In that you have this hibernate.cfg.xml file. That's it. Next, you can provide the data source details, the database details. You see, we have configured the data source details on the bean, which is just above it. Yes. Then here these are the two details which are needed. In the configuration file, you have that configuration details, data source details. We are supplying them here. That's all. Now you can just give an ID to this bean. Okay, just give an ID to this bean. What is it? Session factory. I'll call it as a session factory bean. Session factory. You know what? Now this bean is going to also serve like a session factory to create sessions. You'll use this bean itself to create sessions also here, I can say. Okay, you'll use this bean itself to create sessions as well. When we were using plain Hibernate framework, how we used to obtain the session factory object, you're familiar with it, right? So there was a big process. We used to write the code explicitly. First of all, create that configuration class object, instantiate the configuration class, then create a service registry object to register the services, and then what you got, then you need to use that configuration object to create a session factory object. But now you see the framework will take care of it. You don't have to worry about it. Just provide these details. That's enough. Just provide these details here. That should be enough, I can say. So we got the session factory. See, the advantage of using Spring here is that we can just make use of this dependency injection, container support. We got the support from the container also, right? Yes. Okay. Now, once we are done with this integration, The next thing is we can straight away start using the Hibernate framework. Yes. Yes, previously we did develop this controller. Uh, what controllers we have here? Okay, let me just develop a controller called as product controller. Okay, let me just create a new controller here. Product controller. So in this controller, we'll add a method which will which will be responsible for displaying all the product records by fetching from them from the database server. Okay. Yeah. So for this, I'll take the help of a repository as well. Let me just create a repository bean for this purpose. Oh, did I do Signama? Sorry, make it a class, not a problem. Defining an interface also to define the contract for that repository. So I want to define a method here, so which will be responsible for fetching all the product records from the product table. So that is what it should do. Okay, fetch or get products, let's say. So it should fetch all the product records. Here, I'll make this class implements that interface iProduct repository. We will override this method get products. Now this repository is responsible for interacting with the database server. So in order to interact with the database server, so this repository it needs to use Hibernate framework here. It should use Hibernate framework. Yeah. So you know the procedure to fetch the records from the table, right? So in Hibernate we have that session component which is responsible for that. Here, first of all, to create a session, you need a session factory object. That is the first thing which you need. In order to create a session, you need a session factory object. Yes. So session factory object will be created by the framework itself. You don't have to worry about it. Okay. Yes. Now all you need to do is just ask the framework to provide that dependency session factory. Ask the framework to provide that dependency session factory here. That is what we'll do. Okay. So private session factory, declare that session factory reference variable. You know that local session factory bean which I've configured, it implements this interface session factory. Just do this auto-void. Just add auto-void. So what the framework does, it will inject that bean which you have configured, local session factory bean, into this session factory property. Okay, we got this bean, right? Local session factory bean, which we have configured in this root context XML file. So this bean will be injected into this product repository. Now you got the session factory. So let's create a session. Session factory dot open session. Now, after opening the session, now I would like to fetch all the product records. What to do? I want to fetch all the product records. What are we supposed to do here? You know, actually, we need to write a HQL query for that purpose. There is no predefined method, am I right? You won't find any predefined method for this. You have to construct a query, HQL query for that purpose. You have to construct a HQL query. That is the only thing which you can do here. Just construct a HQL query. Yeah, just construct a HQL query for this purpose. See session dot create query, and you will find that here you have to pass that query from product. That's it. You will get a query object, right? Yes. Once you got the query object, now you can execute that query. So that query, sorry, you get list of product objects here. Query dot list. Execute that query. It returns that list. In turn, this method here, it can return that list. Now you can close the session as well. Close the session. Don't forget to close the session. Don't close session factor. Just close session. Now see, this method will be used by the controller to fetch the records. The controller will use this method to fetch the records, I can say. Yes. So this repository is going to be the dependency for the controller. The repository is going to be the dependency for the controller. The iProduct repository. Let's ask the framework to inject it. Sorry. We'll make this class a controller class. In this repository also, let's configure it as a bean using this repository annotation. Product repository. Okay. Now we'll add a method to the controller which returns a model and view object to fetch products. So this method will configure a URL for this method, request mapping / products. You see, product repository dot get products. Sorry. You'll get that list of product objects. You can take that products list. Okay, the controller, when it is invoked, you see, using this URL products. So this method, the controller will fetch that product records with the help of that repository. Okay, once you got that list of products, the controller, it won't directly display the records, right? Who will display the records here? Yes. Who will display the records here? Yes.
View.
The view component, right? Now this controller should return a model in view object. The controller is supposed to return model in view object here. Yes. You know, in the model and view object, you'll add the view component details as well as the response data also. You see, I'm creating this model and view object. Let's do that. We'll add a JSP name. Let's say products view.jsp. I mean, just the JSP name is enough. You should not add that .jsp extension. Next, let's add that response data also. Model view dot add object products. You add the product object reference here. And then we will return this model and view object. That list is added to the model and view object if you can check this. Okay. Yeah. So this is what we got. Now let's create a JSP page in the webbing views folder. I'll create a JSP. I guess in our previous application we have a JSP to display the product records. We just make use of it. Products view JSP. You see, I have to make some changes here. So this is the object name products. The list object name here. You'll have description instead of quantity. You see, we'll create a table and to iterate through that products list, we'll use for each tag. As I told you people, it is from JSTL. So you have to import this JSTL tag library. Make sure that you import this JSTL tag library and then use this for each tag. Here, you see, we are passing that products list reference. We are reading the product list reference and we are passing it to this for each tag this way. Now for each tag, it works like a iterator. Okay, it works like iterator. For each iteration, it will read a product object and it will store it in the temporary variable here which you got. Using var attribute, we are declaring a temporary variable. See, and from that, using that object reference which is stored in the temporary variable, we are reading the data. You see, we are creating a row dynamically. Yes, this is what we'll do. So this way, the JSP will take care of rendering the response back to the client. It's displaying or rendering the response back to the client here. That's it. Okay. So we are all set. Let's try to deploy this application on the server and we'll test this code. You see, we'll place the request for the controllers method products. Oops, we got some issue. Oh, sorry. Here, what I did is in the properties also I have to change this property name to description. So we have a property called as description, not quantity here. Yeah, let's place a request again freshly. Have you noticed it down? Hibernate query has been generated. You see it is generating the query, select query. And now you got the records, product records here. Yes. So we are able to successfully integrate Spring with Hibernate here. That is what we did now. You can say. You see, what are the things which you need to consider while integration? First of all, make sure that you add the dependencies. That is the first thing. Hibernate libraries and JDBC drivers. And most important thing, that ORM module libraries also. We got ORM module libraries. So this is also important. Don't forget to add this libraries. String ORM module libraries. Okay. Yeah. So it helps us in integration stuff. So this is mainly responsible for integration. Next, you'll configure the data source details. And you see, you'll have this local session factory bean in the Spring ORM module. In the Spring ORM module, you'll have local session factory bean. Okay. Yes. So this local session factory bean, it mainly helps us in integration, I can say. In this session factory, local session factory bean, you have two properties, config location and data source. Config location is used to configure that Hibernate configuration file details. You see, we have it in the config folder in the class paths. And you're supplying that the data source bean reference, which holds the data source details. That's all. So we are done with the integration, I can say. Now you can start using Hibernate framework. So to use this Hibernate framework, you see, you can use the session factory object. You can ask the framework to inject that session factory object. Now you don't have to explicitly create it. You see this local session factory bean which you got here, this is the session factory itself. So it will be injected into this repository. From here on, the same stuff, routine, same old stuff which we did earlier. So first of all, is this integration clear for you people? Yes? Okay. Now we need to see the transaction management support, but I guess time won't be enough. Let's do one thing. In the next session, I'll come first. In first hour, I'll talk about transaction management. In the second hour, I'll talk about Spring Boot. Definitely on Monday, we'll start with Spring Boot. So our next class will be on Monday at the rate our regular time, 6:30 p.m. Central Time. Okay, Central Time. That means for me it is Tuesday. It will be Tuesday for me. Tuesday at the rate 5 a.m. Indian time. Sorry, 6 a.m. Indian time. Tuesday 6 a.m. Indian time for me. Yes. Okay then. I'll add this record, code, everything to the folder today. Just give me some time. Thank you all. Bye bye.